My name's Bob Whalen. I'm a software engineering coach with Target, specifically the Target's Dojo, which is an organization within Target that helps to coach teams in software and development, agile, and product best practices.
And also DevOps. I'm Bobby Stockstead. I'm also a software engineering coach working in the dojo with Bob, and really our main focus and guiding mission is to try and make all the teams at Target better and help them learn these different mindsets and mature as they go through their careers.
So today we came to talk about not the entire Target agile and DevOps transformation, that journey that we're still on, that we started about 5 years ago, but just this one aspect of it that we feel is worth focusing in on, how we learned how to manage governance and kind of converted that to more of a guidance approach, and what drove those decision points. So we'll start with our obligatory Target slide.
Hopefully everyone here has maybe heard of Target. We're a large retailer focusing solely on underwear and socks for everyone. But over the last few years, we've really started to become much more of a tech company, focusing on building internal products and trying to just level up and evolve with the ever-changing world of retail.
Of note is the size of our technology at Target, over 4,500, assuming I updated this slide recently, and 300 product teams, and that continues to grow. Target's very focused since 2015 on bringing our technology talent in-house and developing it rather than outsourcing it.
So a retailer this size, we have extremely unique issues. At the time, say like 5 years ago, kind of when we started this journey of transformation, we were about 80% outsourced, a lot of contractors. We had communities of excellence and creating a lot of silos around, say, like testing, around infrastructure, databases, engineering, and our projects were measured in times of like years and doing a lot of project management versus, a quicker approach, and back then everything was waterfall. So decide a project on the business side, work with your partners, and years later you might have something that almost resembled what you were going for. And at this time, everything was, deployed to customers without much forethought to what they were actually looking for or driving that real value. And there wasn't any accountability on the engineering side or any sole source that could really care for these products.
And not to paint a totally bleak picture of the Target landscape at the time, we were still growing, we were still successful, we were still getting the job done, but it was a struggle and it wasn't moving fast enough. Basically, it was exactly like my previous company in every way. And I imagine many of you can relate to all the struggle that if you were doing development at that time, if your company is or was struggling with before Agile and DevOps methodologies with that waterfall world, figuring out how do we handle the amount of change that the world is going through, that the retail environment's going through, that the business environment's going through at the rate it's needed.
So turns out we weren't very unique, but we tried to come at this with a lot of the industry standard approaches. A lot of vendor software that was designed around these pieces, a lot of enterprise architecture trying to govern a bigger and bigger changing world. And we weren't actually addressing the real issues, that we were siloing communication. We were focusing in on like just these pockets of change, but we weren't looking at the big picture. We weren't connecting the Target employees and team members actually to our guests.
And as an engineer, working in an environment like this, it's really frustrating because you read blogs, you come to these conferences, and then you go back to work and you understand the problem. You can see it, you can articulate it. Like, we're siloed. We're not deploying fast enough. We're not testing the right way. There are better approaches to this, let me tell you about it. But the decisions on if the company would adopt these new practices, what technology we were going to use, weren't being made by the engineers. They were being made for the engineers. And that's not the kind of environment engineers want to work in. So top talent starts to leave your company, and morale starts to drop. It's difficult. Review boards start to get created, and those review boards create fear. I worked at a company previously where you would have to take every deployment before a group of engineers who would then cherry pick problems and point fingers at you and send you back in a very public way. And that doesn't create an environment of psychological safety to try and experiment and innovate.
So obviously not everyone just saw this and said, yeah, this is fine, I'm just going to go with this. There was actually a grassroots movement that started within Target, and they were like, hey, we want to be agile about this. We hear about this great thing called DevOps, and these group of people got together and started, growing the practice, working together, changing teams, and that actually turned into what is now the Target Dojo. And it's a story that's been out, and it's been presented at a few different DevOps days, but that dojo kind of came out of grassroots and became this movement to how do we teach teams and how do we train teams and bring them into an immersive environment where we can get all the people in one room, get everyone together, and really start to drive that change.
And that's not a unique thing for Target, that a lot of companies start off with that grassroots movements. We hear that story a lot. We've seen a lot. Target wasn't the first, it's not the last. That was powerful, but it wasn't what began Target's transformation. That started in mid-2015 when we got a new CIO. His name was Mike McNamara. There, again, have been multiple articles detailing him and what he came in and his goals that you could research. But specifically in 2015, he came in and asserted himself right away with a set of instructions.
So he kind of came in and said, you know what? I don't like how this is working. By the end of the year, everyone is going to be agile. By the end of the year, we're going to be doing DevOps, and everyone's going to be on a product team.
Okay, cool. He then said that we're going to build our talent in-house. We're going to move away from contractors. We're going to start coding. We're not managing contractors who code. We're going to develop everybody in TTS, Target
Technology Services.
Technology Services.
I swear he works for Target.
Yeah. Target Technology Services is going to be technical. It's going to have some understanding of code. That should be what we're striving for. We're going to be full stack engineers. And we're not going to initially go and look for vendor solutions. We're going to focus on building our technology in-house, which is a dramatic shift in what they were doing at the time. So turns out, when you can sit there and talk about the problem and discuss, hey, like, I know how to fix this, what we need, all you need to do is listen to me, and then suddenly they listen to you. And in a snap of a finger in a 6-month period, we are now going to run as an agile company. Everyone is going to build, everyone goes DevOps. That's a little terrifying. To take an IT department the size of Target's, TTS, and transform it in that amount of time.
And to think about the mindset of, usually we have these things to fall off on, of, oh, we don't have leadership support, so that's actually what's getting in our way, or there's all these barriers, and then someone directly at the top, above all the VPs of the solution portfolios, gets to say, nope, remember that thing that the grassroots group's doing? They're right, I'm making everyone do that. So how do you start moving forward with that?
So suddenly you're not doing a DevOps experiment, you're setting standards, you're defining practices that have to be replicated across all new products. We need to bring in new engineers and train them. We have to pick technology that we're going to use, pick new stacks.
And we had to go through rapid changes of how do we actually support teams that are trying to build quickly? How are we supposed to support teams that are going to be trying things out, experimenting, connecting with products, building MVPs that are in the time of 2 weeks versus like 8 months?
And how do we govern that? how do we have a small review board that doesn't have experience with this process and technology begin to dictate how an entire IT department is going to execute it?
So at first we started with a lot of like, hey, let's do what we were doing before, but we'll just make it bigger. We'll try and increase the problem. We tried to have enterprise architecture try and define these things for people, but it's just not the same when they're working in a completely different way. The old world is EA will come in and say, you're going to build this solution with this tech stack. It's going to look like this, and this is how it's going to integrate with other people. And the engineers aren't going to just go build things. They're just taking marching orders and executing. Well, now we've completely flipped that. And the mindset is, we want you to build what you think is right, what you think is important, and you're empowered to do that. And so how does EA come at that and govern that world of you're deciding your own things, but I'm trying to decide at the same time?
So the other aspect of it from an engineering perspective, you're now not only DevOps, but we're agile and we're products. So we're not on a project anymore, we're on this product. We're going to be on this product for the foreseeable future, and we want to get an MVP out there. We're used to getting requirements, fully functional requirements. We have to work in a brand new way. What does that look like? How am I supposed to do it? What are the rules? What is my role? All of this confusion that inserts, the dojo begins to help with that. The dojo was already there. We were already working with teams, so we just expand the effort. We start bringing them in as a team. We start working with them, explaining how this is done, coaching them on those practices, showing them the technology that other teams have used, how it can be used, iterating on sprints, and really exposing to this and giving them confidence to take it out and show other teams how to do it. So
it's important to note too that we weren't just coaching the teams. We were also trying to take the approach of there are a lot of leaders in this space who are just as confused and just as worried about how do I manage these teams, how do I manage this space. And so there was coaching that happened at all levels, and everyone was very willing and excited about this change, but no one knew how to do it.
So we set out on this journey. We start to try to have the teams of authority explain what's going on, but it's a big company and there's confusion. And what we realize is you can't really govern in the same way anymore. So Target kind of lets it go and say, you're full stack ownership, you're empowered. Go off and build the applications we need. We have some guidelines. We want you to build it with open source software, open source projects. We're not spending money on it. We want you to hire engineers to build it. We want you to train those engineers.
We want you to fail.
Yeah.
That was another big one that a lot of people really struggled with in a corporate environment. It's not like do everything perfectly and get a good review. It's we want you to try. We want you to be empowered to try things, try different technologies. No one's brought this into Target before, but go for it. Fail, and then bring that learning to everyone else.
So this was a history lesson for me too, because I learned about Target and the dojo in a presentation much like this in 2015 at Velocity. I attended, and then when this transformation happened, they started reaching out to anyone with the skill sets they were looking for, and they reached out to me, and because of that presentation, I answered the call. So they sold me on it, and in March of 2016, I joined Target. And I start to get the lay of the land, look at their landscape, understand what the problem was I was supposed to work on. I'm supposed to modernize one of their legacy products with my team, and I'm a lead engineer, and I'm gonna make those decisions. And it takes a couple months, but I realize I'm not waiting for someone to tell me how to do it. I'm supposed to tell them how we're gonna do it, which wasn't really clear at first. It wasn't easy to understand that was the way. And so, okay, I look over there, and that team's building an API, and they're using that framework, and that team over there that I also in my area is doing it too, but they're using a different framework. So which one do you want me to use? And the answer was, you pick. And it's like, okay, but how do I know I picked right? Like, how do I know I'm doing the job that you want? And what I realized was this was empowerment. I had not really truly experienced it before, and I didn't recognize it when I had it. There were guidelines out there, but I wasn't looking, I didn't need anyone to sign off on them. I had all the information I needed and all the power I needed to just start building a production application.
And that's a scary world at times when you start to get to that new world of, I can choose. No longer is someone going to sign off and someone much more important or higher up is going to make a big decision for a target. It's if you're working on an important system and you're on the team building that system, you are trusted to make the best choice. And we're truly starting to treat engineers as the professionals and empowering them, guiding them, and how do we trust them?
And so suddenly you're at this company and I start to see other people come in and they start coming to me and saying, what am I supposed to be doing? And I show them all the options and they say, yeah, well, which one? And suddenly I start to understand really what the problem was and like if suddenly you empower a technology department, how would they know that they were empowered? How could they trust it? Because that language gets used a lot. I have 15 years of experience at a corporation before I started with Target, and they would tell me I was empowered all the time, and I butted heads with a lot of people to learn that I was not truly empowered. And suddenly, no one was stopping me. No one was asking questions. Target had a lot of work to do, and they didn't want to babysit me. They wanted me to do the job they hired me for.
And as this happens, suddenly there are certain engineers that are a little bit curious, and they start playing with everything. And they say, well, let's try Golang, let's try Perl, let's try Python. Maybe this could solve a solution. There's 1,000 different API frameworks, let's just bring them all in. And so this is where it very quickly can lead to a noisy and difficult to follow tech landscape. So we figured that, or we found that we needed some way to guide people. And this is where that guidance piece comes in. How do you let people experiment and choose, but still have some organization and maybe a path forward?
So Target wasn't going for a complete absence of governance. But at the same time, they weren't sure how to really communicate. Things were moving so fast, this problem wasn't really something that was consciously happening. There was a group of people that was called Enterprise Services. They worked pretty closely with the dojo, and they were building applications as examples for projects that needed. They were supporting many teams, but they weren't setting rules. They were just kind of showing the way. So how can we start to decide and narrow down like what the options were? And if we were going to do it, what would it look like if we were doing it right?
Yep, so here are some of the core things that we isolated that we felt were very important for teams. And with this, we wanted all the information to be exposed, available, and we wanted people to try these new things, fail with them, and then share that story and start promoting those failure stories as success stories. And knowing that like rather than spending 2 years on this product and then having it fail, we spent 2 weeks, we did this MVP and we failed. Think of how much money we saved because we failed now versus later.
But if we were going to do it, if Target was going to start down this path, how do we stop it from turning into that governance? And how would it truly streamline the work and reduce the friction the teams had when they're making these decisions and giving them the confidence they need? In February, before I started, they tried an experiment, and it was a few months before I even really understood what it was. It wasn't widely broadcast, but we created the recommended technologies repository. So this was an MVP, and so the idea here was let's crowdsource our governance model. It was a thought, and to be honest, I'm not 100% sure who thought of it or where it came from. It was just there when I got there. Someone pointed it out to me, and as soon as I saw it, I recognized it for what it was. And what it was simply a Git repository.
Right away, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Git or some source control tool, but the main reason that this is a Git repo is because of the way Git encourages collaboration and the fact that everyone has access to this. So that piece where it's transparent and we know that we're not hiding things or doing things behind closed doors, everyone can see this and everyone can reference it. And also, it leads into the crowdsourcing piece. With open source technologies, you have it on Git or something like that so that you can actually try and contribute. The idea here is that we're encouraging every engineer to own this. If you disagree with the technology or you want to see a new technology, this is that forum where you get to promote that.
So we create a file for each area that we think we need to have some governance for. Pretty simple, a document. And we can apply our DevOps practices to it. We can have workflows, trigger automation when changes are requested or occur that need review. Anyone can follow this repository, and that was the first thing I did when I saw it. I clicked follow, and suddenly I was getting emailed from engineers around Target that I had not heard of before, and hearing their opinions and suggestions and talking about technologies that I hadn't known about yet. Just flowing through my email and hearing what the bigger conversation was happening around this IT department that was across 3 buildings in Minneapolis and 3 other locations around the world. So, yeah. So we start with a template, right? State the scope of what this document's trying to cover. What's the current technical landscape? And what's the motivations for what we're trying to accomplish? This is in each area of technology has this same template and follows it. And it's filled out by the community most interested. And it's continually updated. So as opinions arise, the generic header information in these templates continues to evolve and be updated. It's a living document.
And the key to that is that we're trying to encourage it to be flexible. We know that in the tech landscape of today, there are constantly new frameworks coming out, constantly evolving the technology to solve the same problems or new problems, and we need a system where we can actually keep up with that. And so now it's no longer a few people who are trying to watch everything in the tech landscape. It's the people that are actually solving the problems and working with it day to day that can actually advocate for these technologies or promote them to the rest of the company.
So we keep it simple. Each technology option that we consider that's listed in the recommended document has a status. And right now there are 3. Recommended, limited use, and do not use. And since I've been at Target, there have been pull requests and issues to debate just these statuses and their meaning. That continues to evolve. And this has worked out well. The simpler we keep it, the better off we are. So recommended simply means that if you see an item in the recommended technology list with recommended, you can use it. You don't have to ask permission. You're good to go. Here's a link to some information on how it's managed and where you can get more help at Target on that particular option. We document use cases and rationale, so you don't have to ask questions as to why it got this status. That's clear. Also, the pull request history and issue thread that generated has some of that context and history.
And another interesting thing there is like a sign of flexibility and kind of a story is originally we didn't even consider compliance. It started with a group of teams that rarely had to worry about security or compliance or SOX or anything like that. But then as we encouraged more and more people to join, we found out that there was this ever-growing need of, well, that's great and I see that it's recommended, but I can't use it because I'm under SOX or I can't use it because I'm under PCI. And so we evolved. We changed the format even to adapt to the environment that we were working with. And so now we have guidance for teams on compliance. And if the next thing comes and it's some great thing of technology, should everything use AI or whatever it is, we have a forum and a way to update and change and adapt to that landscape.
So limited use gets a little more gray, right? What does limited use mean? That is often an initial question. And essentially it means that it doesn't mean you can't use it, but you need to understand why you're using it, what the use case is. There are certain business criteria that require an option that we don't think is right for everyone. So check with the architecture team, check with the community and make sure that this is the right fit for the problem you're trying to solve. And do not use, that's pretty clear. We're really careful about labeling something do not use, and often it's compliance or financial reasons. Again, we're focused on open source. We want to bring value to Target, not spend its money because we think something looks cool. So,
Yep, here we have an example of a pull request of a user out on a product team actually recommending a change to the system. And highlights here is that the conversation that happens around this is maybe guided and facilitated by an architecture board, but they're not the ones making the decision. And this is open to everyone. Anyone on the community who has a say on this technology is encouraged to step in, say their piece, maybe upvote it with some thumbs or whatever it is, and kind of drive that conversation of like the open source community, but in-house.
And so the conversation doesn't happen behind closed doors. It doesn't happen in a private room. The conversation happens in my inbox every morning. I see each post on the repo that I follow, if I want to follow it, or I can go browse the issues and really dig into it. It's all there. It's all public. I can see who is it. I can message someone directly and ask a follow-up question if I don't want to do it publicly. But if I want to contribute to the conversation, everybody sees that.
Yes. Okay, so
Coaching.
The only important thing about this slide is that that top comment and the little icon all the way on the right is me. Very proud of myself. I contributed talking about changing tests. But the idea here is that it brings awareness to all these things. It puts it out in the open. It's very transparent. And you can kind of gauge who's actually working with this. And you can find who to reach out as an advocate. And
by doing it this way, and again, an example of how proud Bobby is on his one comment, it's an open source culture that we're promoting for our architecture discussion. Our internal engineering culture mimics this positive open source community.
Does your thing work?
Sorry. We both can't do it.
This is what happens when I try and help.
Okay, so what we're suggesting is any engineer at any level can change the direction for an enterprise, like add or change a status in our architecture guidelines. And that technically is true.
And this kind of goes back to, like, in the early days of when it was grassroots, there were all these things of like, there's still leadership in the way, or there's all these problems. And now that's completely removed, and it's kind of a scary world. The engineers could truly come in and say, I have a great use case, I have a new technology, I think all of Target should use it, and you might be successful in that just because you had a good point to make.
So CockroachDB is a great example. And a team read about it, was interested, it fit their use case. They felt that there was value that technology could bring to Target for not just their team, but others. They were allowed to experiment, and then they created an issue in the recommended technologies repo. The community chimed in, and then quarterly, what happens is all of those issues that look ready to go before what we call our CIO architecture workshop meeting that happens every quarter, they're brought together and organized by the group that puts that meeting on, which is mostly made up of our enterprise architecture team, and they meet. And that meeting is closed door, and invite only, but if you were the one who posted the invite, you're the one who speaks. So you stand in front of our CIO and make your case, and there's a conversation back and forth. And at the end of that meeting, a decision's made by that board, and the recap is made and shared out, and the repo is updated. So one engineer can, yes, say, hey, we should be using this, and we should be telling the entire Target technology community that this is a good option in these cases.
And this really was kind of the driving force and the mechanism at which we shift our mindset about how architecture works at Target. Large corporation with a lot of technologies. It used to be one architect over an area, laid down the frameworks, the technology, and now it's very much the opposite. The engineers are deciding what they should build because they're trusted to know best for their product. And the architects now have a role of promoting these best practices, promoting the good technologies they're seeing, and help moderating this forum.
Yeah, initially I think the forum wasn't the focus of architecture, but they were big participants in it. After our modernization journey began to really take shape and architecture direction started to become more clear, they started to really weigh in and take that moderator role and take that ownership and saw it as like, this is something that we need to preserve and we need to focus and we need to leverage to share out our vision. And then as we moved on, we were able to create more guidelines and more ways to shape target and this transformation and really narrow in on value. So give frameworks to teams to make decisions on how to build applications. So less and less Wild West and less reinventing the wheel.
And around this time, we had a new self-labeled chief architect of Target Technology Services. And he came in with a vision of how to do architecture in a simple, clean way. And he made this document that you can look at in one page, and he's shared out at several different conferences. But essentially, we have a lot of systems that need to communicate and a lot of different data owners. So he transitioned our whole view of architecture and engineering to be microservice-based and this platform 2019, as it calls it. And it really gave us the structure for which every engineering team can now look at this one-pager and see, where do I fit? Am I providing data? Am I using data? And everyone's building APIs and sharing that information.
So he didn't, again, it was, he could share it in a one-pager, and there were supporting documents and teams and meetings, but it wasn't architecture as a technology stack or technical guidelines, how to implement it. There wasn't, you need to review and get approval on your ideas first. It was, if this is where you fit into the company, these are the things you need to be doing. So again, the approach was guidance, a little bit of governance, but they weren't trying to micromanage how we build our applications. They were depending on the teams to follow the instructions. And it was announced and put out there, and the expectation were the teams were going to do it. There was no approval process. The assumption was the teams would follow up. And later on, when teams share out their products or work and integrate with other teams, if there are challenges, those guidelines come into play and say, oh no, this is how we should be interfacing. See, like this is the plan. See how this other team's doing it. There's those documents, that guidance supports us to move forward, but it doesn't rule us to move forward.
So the recommended technologies was one way that we helped with the guidance. And it's important to point out that that's not the only thing that we did, and that's not the only thing that was the key to our success. It was the combination of a lot of different efforts. And some of these we started doing internal conferences to help grow the mindset, to help with that shared knowledge. We implemented demo day. So 4 times a year, every quarter, we get a bunch of teams with their innovations, bring them all together. Everyone at the company can come through and see what are the MVP products that are being built, what new solutions are there, and what can inspire us to change.
And those are standing room only. Like we demo day, Intercon, which is an opportunity for anyone in the company to do what I'm doing right now, put together a presentation and give it to anyone who wants to attend. Code Red is our hackathon, and again, that's another sold-out event. Any team can take any idea, leverage any kind of technology at Target, and spend a day to do it, and then we do Shark Tank-style demos and give out prizes to the best demo. And all of these things are just other ways to show teams that they're empowered to try things and let them see what other teams are doing and allow the community to drive the best practices. So then we did all this. We moved forward as an IT department. Mike drove TTS, and we didn't really bring the business along with us right away, right?
No, not at all. And they were left to try and scramble and basically keep up. We wanted them to change with us, but we didn't have any way to enforce it. We were strictly trying to reinvent the engineering piece of it.
And as a member of the product team, it was interesting to see because we had all this agile training. We had transformed, changed roles, brought in engineers, but it was the same business team on the other side. And they were trying to understand and adapt as they went. They realigned with us in a lot of ways, and they came along, but suddenly we were empowered to do things and like continuous delivery and continuous deployment and try these experiments. And they weren't used to having their products continuously deployed. They were used to telling us when to deploy it. They wanted their product delivered as a final thing on a date. And we were telling them, but we're going to put out this MVP with your first feature and try it and get feedback and see how I like it. And that sounded good, but it was really hard to adapt to. So what we realized was we had broken down all these silos in TTS, and we become this engineering community and this product team. And now we were a bigger silo, along with the business. We hadn't started off with that product mentality. And we realized like DevOps and Agile, those are good tools and they work, but they don't get you where you need to go. They don't get the value that you're trying to bring to technology is there to bring to your company, to your business. And we weren't quite reaching that end goal yet.
Right. We started focusing on value for the first time, and we realized that that's not an effort that just lives within the engineering group. It really needs to start addressing everything with design, architecture, support services, whatever that is for the tech side, but then also the business, the requirements people, the people that are connected to our guests. How do we encourage them to be part of this journey and help drive it faster forward versus just our silo?
And there were other stumbles. We didn't get it right out of the gate. We're constantly failing and learning, as we mentioned. One great example was we had a team really level up our cloud infrastructure. And if you're interested more about that, we've spoken, have our cloud team speaks at Google Next. You can check out other presentations they've done, but we had one team come out and say, you know what, this is so good that we shouldn't be doing anything else. And they said, everyone from this point forward needs to use this. It's mandatory.
Engineers hated it. Just because it was mandated.
As soon as that happened, the conversation became totally about the fact that they did that, and not why they did it or how valuable it was or if it was the most correct decision we could make technically to move forward. And they had built a pretty great product, but they actually hurt their adoption rate. And they themselves realized this and were forced to roll back that statement and say, okay, not everybody has to rush to it. Just try it out. And it was funny to be at the dojo at that time and move into the coaching teams. And they're coming in and teams are coming in and they're saying, oh, they want me to use that, but it doesn't do what I need. And that wasn't right. But the arguments and the whisper down the lane mentality had started to create stories about problems with this product that may not have existed or had been fixed. So we really started to recognize that our assumptions of creating technology that teams wanted to use and making tools that are so good that it brought them to adoption rather than trying to dictate adoption was the way to go. And again, we learned that governance wasn't the right move here. Like there are other approaches to get your IT, your technology moving in the direction that you're hoping it goes. At this point, though, we start to learn like all this empowerment. There's a new kind of accountability, and this goes into that product team conversation. We now are empowered. We're able to take these risks. We're able to fail. The business team, they don't want to fail. Like they weren't ready to join us in our failure attempts. They wanted 100% success. They wanted to report on success. So now we're accountable on making sure we could bring the business team along with us, that they understood how to communicate this.
And there's a flip side to this where the engineers are now in a position where they're trusted to start thinking about value, which is a very difficult conversation for people that have been implementing requirements for many years. So now we're asking them, when you get a story, don't just take it at face value, implement it, and move on. Try and understand the value of it. Challenge it, change it. Understand that everything that's coming in is done through a human. There's human error, but only through these conversations and connecting can we actually drive at what is truly important and valuable. And the engineers are now trusted to have those conversations and to be thinking about that when they implement it.
Yeah, it's not enough to be able to tell people technically why you're right. They need to understand at the business level. You need to be able to communicate that value so that they become your advocates to their leaders. And that's when you start to get these awesome product teams. You break down the silos, and that team in the dojo is not a technical team. It's a mix of a cross-functional mix of everyone related to that product. And you're having conversations about DevOps with people that don't consider themselves to be in a technology department. So we've we've done all this. We set this mandate. We do the recommended technology, the intercom, the demo day. Some years have gone by. So how can we say like this experiment is moving in the right direction, that it's working? So we told this whole story, we wrote this deck, and we're like, what are we going to say at this point? How do we say that success? And I came up with this. You should Google it, because Target over the last couple of years, from a retail perspective, is an innovator. We've been rolling out technology that we've built, that we've came up with, that team members have created products that they've invented, that have made it to our customers and delighted customers.
And we can see that like things are happening quickly now. Shipped, we're now able to ship to store. Drive Up, all of these initiatives were an idea that was quickly tested and then implemented within months. Whereas previously, just the idea to like discovery and design took several months or a year. And so like the more and more we build these product teams that are connecting all these people and going forward, we're able to see these rapid success stories and focus on what's actually important and driving value to our customers.
And we realized that if you look, Target has a public Git repo, and we in the last couple of months we've added a few more open source projects that we created at Target that we wanted to give back to the community. We talked about Demo Day and that Code Red Hack, those standing room only events. Like we can't, people get excited to attend those. Like there's leaders are excited to talk about how their teams are attending those. Like the entire TDS department takes a day off to do this kind of thing. So you sit back and realize that it's no longer that we want to be try to become a technology company anymore. We have become that technology company. We are a technology company. It's visible in everything we do, and it's easy to point at Target's retail success and say that that's something that we've helped to enable, that our great business strategy is augmented by its technology instead of succeeding in spite of it. So all this happened. We did the governance and guidance. We've had all this success. Target's feeling pretty good about itself. What do we take away from this? Because it started off like a grassroots effort, and then we told you like we had a CEO come in and do, or CIO come in and do a pretty brave thing. So should we take away from that you need that CIO to come in and be brave for you? Is that the point of this conversation? That as we were putting it together, it became a struggle. Like is that what we're telling you? Wait for the right job to come, or come join Target?
Yes. Yeah. Or maybe not. But the big thing is that it wasn't just a CIO coming in and giving one mandate. It wasn't just the grassroots movement. It wasn't just the shift in engineering culture, or just that one Git repo where we could have collaboration. It was all of these things, and trying to change our company's culture around engineering and the mindset that engineers are empowered. They no longer need to be hidden in the basement and just given requirements and code. We're trying to bring them into the light. We're empowering them. We're trusting them to be professionals and make the right decisions and deliver these great products.
So this way of doing guidance versus governance, it doesn't need to be applied at the entire corporate level. It could be just how your team operates or your department. It could start in that grassroots movement. The value there was in the approach, within recognizing the culture and recognizing the way you wanted to work as a company together, instead of to rely on a small set of engineers to be accountable for all of the decision making.
And again, here with the mindsets, empathy and psychological safety were pretty key points to our success. Yeah. We needed to be able to make people comfortable enough to try the things that they've never been brave enough to try, to understand that they can do things and they're not going to get punished for them in any way.
So this was a process that we went through, but what we didn't talk about was all the things we learned, all the failures we had, and what technology we ended up landing on, how we got to our current platform architecture. And we didn't get that because we bought it from a vendor or because we read it in a Gartner report. We learned that we could meet that challenge of transforming Target's architecture by looking to ourselves. And this process evolved from us recognizing that and attempting to do it, and being empowered to attempt it. And that's really the message we want to take. Like, empowerment opened up the door for this experiment. This experiment led to more empowerment, led to a lot of great work at Target and a lot of great success, and a place that I'm now proud to work at as an engineer.
Same.
So, and that's it.
Thank you for attending our talk. Go and be empowered.
Yes.